tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This will give us time to add additional protocols to reduce crowding.
A phased approach to back to school amid a surge of COVID cases. The province delays the return to the classroom in the new year. Also,
now we gotta go outside and just goof around.
The BC Winter Watch continues with more snow and extreme cold on its way.
The worst part was probably being in the house and hearing all the animals mooing and bawling out there.
Farmers, stoic, self-sufficient, and determined to pull themselves back up. But why experts say mental health supports are also essential to their recovery from a string of natural disasters.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away for the rest of the week. The return to classes in BC are being pushed back for at least a week, and at least for most K-12 students. As Mira Baines tells us, the province says the delayed start will allow for enhanced safety measures amid a surge in COVID cases.
The full return to school has been delayed by a week due to the surging number of COVID-19 cases.
All schools will open on either January 3rd or 4th as planned for children of essential workers and those with special needs, with full return to classes for all students on January 10th.
School staff and teachers are expected to be at work next week. Parents who are also essential workers are being told to make arrangements with school principals. The Minister of Education says there will be additional guidelines in place to prevent the spread of infection.
Implementing strategies to prevent crowding during class transition times, such as staggering start and stop times or recess times, break times. Holding school gatherings and events such as assemblies in a virtual format.
Whiteside says schools will use the next week to put those measures in place. The BC Teachers Federation had been calling for a delayed start to school and says more still needs to be done.
We did want to hear that N95 masks would be available, and we didn't hear that. We also heard, Dr. Henry say that they were going to be working with school administration to disseminate information about what's happening in schools in terms of the Omicron variant, but we don't know what that's going to look like. We also need more details about testing.
She says the highest number of cases in schools is among 5 to 11-year-olds, and many haven't had their second shots. The union is also calling for accelerated booster shots for teachers.
It seems like it would be prudent to provide those booster shots to teachers and support staff in order to keep schools open, because we're also in a critical teacher shortage.
Parents say they're relieved and have a chance to evaluate whether they send their children back to class.
That gives parents a little bit of a relief that it gives them an extra week to kind of to see what the numbers are like, especially because we were going back to school so quick right after New Year's.
Health officials say they do expect to see more people calling in sick over the coming days. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Health officials have been warning the Omicron variant can spread quickly and is doing exactly that across BC. Belle Puri is following that part of the story for us. Belle, what do we know about new COVID cases in the province?
We know that the daily number of reported cases has well surpassed the worst case scenario predicted by health officials a couple of weeks ago. In the past 24 hours, BC has recorded 2,944 new cases of COVID-19. 70 to 80% of them have been identified through genome sequencing as Omicron. But the key word here is reported. As of yesterday, you can see the beginnings of a plateau in daily case counts. But the messaging from the province is reported cases don't tell the whole story for one major reason. Testing centers. They've reached maximum capacity. People with minor symptoms are being told not to bother with a test. They should just assume they have COVID. Other people are being given rapid tests. The daily numbers are only based on the results of molecular PCR tests.
We know a little bit from early on in the pandemic where we had limited testing capacity. And on average, there's probably 3 to 4 times the number of people who truly have COVID than what is in our surveillance numbers on a daily basis. And that is something that we've seen throughout this pandemic.
Right now in BC, 193 people are in hospital because of COVID. 66 of them are in intensive care units. And since Christmas Eve, 5 more people have died from the virus.
Well, what do we know about Omicron compared to other variants we've seen since the pandemic started?
Well, health officials are the first to admit the variant has left us with more questions than answers. What they do know is that it's different from other variants and is spreading differently. So people get infected with a much smaller dose of the virus, but much faster. The incubation period is 3 days compared to 6 for other variants. What that means is by the time you show symptoms and get tested, you've likely already passed it on to others.
The puzzle is coming together around Omicron. We are learning more about how fast it spreads, how infectious it is. We know as well that you're 10 times more likely to be reinfected if you have been infected before and are not yet vaccinated. And we know that Omicron is causing more breakthrough infections in people who have been vaccinated.
So in those cases, people who have been vaccinated, people with 2 doses, no matter how long ago you got them, are much more likely to have a milder illness or even remain asymptomatic if they do get infected. And the spread has had an impact on tools designed to mitigate COVID. Contact tracing, for instance. That's not going to work with Omicron. The variant just spreads too fast. The advice? Be aware of how you're feeling. And if you don't feel well, assume it's COVID and stay away from others.
Thanks, Belle. Across the country, a drastic rise in infections. One way to keep those at bay, booster shots. But not all provinces are rolling them out the same way. Here in BC, it's a more gradual approach, focusing first on vaccinating the most vulnerable. But as Renee Filipponi explains, some are growing frustrated with the wait.
It's a daily routine for Cynthia Hadley, checking her phone to see if she can book her booster dose.
There's this Omicron variant going around and everybody's telling us, get your booster, get your booster, get your booster. Well, I'd like to.
The 60-year-old is not yet eligible for a 3rd dose in BC and is frustrated things are taking so long.
I thought I was going to get my invite when I was 6 months from my 2nd booster, and I've turned on the news and all I see is 18-year-olds in Ontario complaining that they can't get their booster after 3 months. And I'm like, why? Why are we being treated like this in BC? In Alberta, I would have had my shot already. In Manitoba, I would have had my shot already.
Unlike in Ontario, there is only one central vaccine booking site, and you need an invite from the province to do it. Right now, only people over 61 and those at risk of severe illness can get a booster. 20% of all adults in BC have received it so far, lower than many other provinces.
More and more people will be invited to book their boosters, and more pharmacies and larger clinics are coming online in the next couple of weeks, so we can move that up for more and more people.
But some want the eligibility broadened, including Megan Mason, who is pregnant.
There's a lot of unknowns for us. Obviously nobody wants to get COVID. But for a pregnant person, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect our unborn child.
In downtown Vancouver, the line for COVID testing wraps around the block, with people waiting hours in the cold.
We're a household of 5, and we had Christmas Eve dinner with one other family who ended up testing positive.
For some, now worried they have COVID, the boosters can't come quick enough.
As soon as it's available, I'd be glad to get it, but there's no real confirmation on when that's going to happen.
The province is promising appointments will be available for everyone starting next month. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC continues to see unusually cold weather, and there's more snow and another dip in the temperatures expected on the south coast overnight. But as Joel Ballard explains, many British Columbians are taking advantage of the unique winter conditions on the west coast.
A classic Canadian scene, just not exactly for BC's south coast.
Freezes a lot in other places, but it wouldn't freeze as much here, so it's exciting that we have somewhere to skate.
Hundreds descended on Surrey's Serpentine Fen for some winter skating.
Usually we just practice and play hockey in rinks, but now we get to go outside and just goof around.
For days, BC has been trapped in a cold spell, as Arctic outflow winds and cold temperatures transform the south coast into a winter wonderland.
We're not out of the Arctic air mass yet, getting back down to the minus double digits tomorrow night. We're cold and clear through Friday, snow for Saturday, before we finally get above the freezing mark on Sunday with rain.
With the wind chill, it could feel as cold as minus 20 on the south coast. Here in Metro Vancouver, we've had a rare white December, and the snow isn't expected to go anywhere anytime soon, with up to 10 centimeters expected to blanket the south coast overnight, stretching all the way to the east coast of Vancouver Island. And that means city crews like the team in Coquitlam are busy at work. And they're out again today preparing for Mother Nature's latest snowfall, salting and sanding priority routes.
Expect winter conditions on local roads. So please ensure that you have winter tires on your vehicles and that you leave extra time to get to your destination and that you drive slow out there.
Across the province, communities are bracing for the cold, frigid conditions, including the Okanagan, which is facing minus 21 with wind chill, and Prince George, which could drop to minus 37. Despite the cold, many are taking advantage of the rare weather, whether that's sliding down backyard ski hills or hitting up the local pond.
Like this is like a once in a very long time kind of thing.
Although it's not always safe.
We are seeing bodies of water freeze up, especially around the edges. The problem is it doesn't mean that it's frozen all the way to the center or that it's thick enough.
Local municipalities are warning the public not to go skating as the ice may be deceivingly thin. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Surrey.
Now let's bring in Johanna Wagstaffe with the first look at the forecast. Joe, we heard that kiddo say perfect conditions for goofing around, as he said. If kiddos want to goof around some more outdoors, what are the conditions in the coming days?
Yeah, Isabel, we have perfect goofing around weather. I'd also like to quote the kid, once in a very long time conditions. We've got more snow coming overnight tonight, and we've got this Arctic air mass still in place. So snow is guaranteed and it's knocking on our door. Take a look at the satellite and radar. We are seeing that snow fill in across the island as we speak, down around Port Renfrew and Souk, seeing that snowfall. It's going to fill in across the strait and from Metro Vancouver around 10, 11 p.m. tonight. That's when we'll see the snow begin to fall, and it'll fall fairly heavily overnight. It's only coming down in sort of an 8 to 10 hour period, tapering off after 7 a.m. tomorrow. So here's a look at those snowfall totals for the south coast. A good 10 plus centimeters. I think where most of Metro Vancouver will wake up to 10 fresh centimeters. There is a chance of those heavier snowfall rates, I should say. We could end up with closer to 15 centimeters for tomorrow morning, and temperatures not expected to rise above -2. So what you see is what you get for the next couple of days. So be prepared for winter driving conditions. Now, the other side of the story is temperatures. And we have had a lot of emails and tweets with advice about hummingbird feeders. As these temperatures continue to drop sub-zero, of course, we have hummingbirds now in Metro Vancouver and on the south coast that stay year-round. And keeping those bird feeders warm is definitely something that a lot of people are thinking about, coming up with creative ways to switch out the sugar water through the overnight. We actually spoke to BC Wild Birders owner earlier today about what one of the best things you can do.
Make sure that late in the afternoon, after 3 o'clock up until, even 6 o'clock when the hummingbirds are still feeding, that you have it warm and thawed then. And then again, first thing in the morning, they need to, drink as much as they can for to keep them warm at night.
Isabelle, yeah, so many people writing in to remind everyone who has those hummingbird feeders to switch them out. So I thought that was great advice. If you're going to do it, make sure it's overnight in the morning hours when they need their most calories. And it's nice to think of the little ones as temperatures really drop over the next couple of days.
Our feathered neighbors, let's think of them
exactly
too, through these conditions. We'll talk to you in a bit, Joe. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Frozen crops and snow drifts. It's the latest challenge farmers are tackling in the Fraser Valley. And it comes a month after extreme rainfall and flooding swept through. Now, professionals are warning of a looming mental health crisis in the farming community in a year that's brought multiple disasters. Michelle Gasoup takes a look at the psychological toll it's taking.
Dairy farmer Blair Sherman won't soon forget the night he thought he might lose some or all of his 200 cows.
The worst part was probably that first night, being in the house and hearing all the animals mooing and bawling out there.
They all survived, but Sherman is still processing the destruction that hit his community that week in November.
Or you see things like this on TV and you just like shake your head and wonder how they're going to survive that, and here we are living it, and like I said, it seems surreal and we're still plugging away.
Just down the road, the Zanardo family is grappling with the loss of a beloved father and grandfather who died just after the floods.
The cancer shouldn't have taken him in the time that it did, but because of the infection, he couldn't make it.
A lung infection they believe was brought on by the back-breaking work of trying to save his farm.
I think his words on his deathbed were, "I can fix anything, I just can't fix this."
Mental health professionals say there's been a 15 to 20% increase in calls to crisis lines since the floods, and they're urging more farmers to reach out and access mental health supports.
It does tend to be a very stoic group, right? Like the farmers in the ag industry tend to value being able to toughen up and have a strong back and suck it up and not have to talk about it too much. And that's where the mental health problems tend to perpetuate and continue on.
She says taking time to rest and recover is advice farmers need to hear.
So I think there's a lot of willingness to just push through, and we need to, you kind of almost need to like slow down to take a break and process the whole.
A lot of the farmers out here are in the same scenario. They're third-generation farmers, and they have a strength that's deeper than you could know. God, faith, reliability, and neighbors, really good neighbors.
Farmers saying it's generations of grit and community that will help guide them through a hopefully brighter new year. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A BC politician is reacting after state police shut down a pro-democracy news site in Hong Kong. 6 current and former editors and board members of Stand News, including a Canadian, were arrested on charges of conspiracy to publish a seditious publication. MP for Vancouver East, Jenny Kwan, condemned the raid on Twitter, calling it confirmation that Hong Kong has turned into a police state.
I believe that this is the first time where a Canadian is being impacted by the national security law. So this is extremely alarming, and journalists are being impacted. And who's to say that journalists abroad, including journalists here in Canada, would not be impacted?
Kwan says Canada should work with its allies to condemn and coordinate further action, and Canada's Consulate General in Hong Kong should assist Canadian Denise Ho and her family. 21 British Columbians are being appointed to the Order of Canada, honored for their extraordinary contributions to this country. Mary-Elaine Turpel-Lafon is among them, recognized for her advocacy for children and Indigenous people. She ended her tenure as BC's representative for children and youth and is also the director of UBC's Residential School History and Dialogue Center. Meanwhile, Margot Greenwood is also being honored. She is a Cree educator and a public health official who has worked for decades to improve the health of Indigenous children, families, and communities. A full list of the appointees can be found on the Governor General's website. The Canucks return to the ice tonight for their first game in nearly 2 weeks. However, they will be playing without a pair of forwards who have been placed on COVID protocol. Brock Besser and Philip Di Giuseppe have been placed into the NHL's COVID-19 protocol, along with one member of the team's support staff. The Canucks were on a 6-game win streak before the NHL forced the postponement of numerous games. COVID hitting hockey, and not just the Canucks. It's forced the cancellation of the World Junior Hockey Championship. More on the reason why next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. A Toronto company is making it easier for people to get their hands on a costume or prop from local movie productions. Ready, Set, Recycle allows anyone from the entertainment world to give away or sell their movie materials. Here's a look at some of the unique items that are up for grabs.
Rubber axles. How cool is that? I like and take great
pleasure in, watching stuff not go into the dump. I like putting stuff where it's needed, wanted, and appreciated. So a windbreaker that would be $40 is now $10. My name is Grant Heggie, and I am the founder and owner of Ready, Set, Recycle. Fake license plates. We use a lot of these in the film industry. The initiative was started because I and others just got sick and tired of watching the colossal amount of waste in the entertainment industry. The set sales are where productions will retain our services to sell everything in an environment like this. So usually we go where the show sends us. We set up in a studio and sell. This is all blood-spattered clothes from a TV show called The String. Ready, Set, Recycle came out of the ashes of a company that I co-owned and co-founded back in the 90s called Set Reset. And we operated a 40,000 square foot warehouse at Lakeshore in Bathurst, and scenery came and went every day. But Ready, Set, Recycle is a 21st century way of doing the same things. Rather than have a 40,000 square foot warehouse, I run the whole company in multiple cities off of my laptop. Here is a suit that goes for $800, going for $450. We put a lot of smiles on faces. It's quite fun. People know that they're getting a great deal because we charge way less than what production would pay for it. And like a lot of this stuff that you're seeing here, it's literally been worn once or used for one scene. I don't know what to expect when the trucks arrive. Sometimes I'll get a list or a manifest of what's on it, but it's never accurate. And I didn't know we were getting that big bear. We're gonna auction this off probably with a buy it now of $2,800. But it's not just set sales that we do. Any production, anybody involved in entertainment, rather than throwing materials into the bin, okay, click, take a picture of it, post it on the website. It's about keeping the flow of things going.
As new infection numbers continue to break records across the country, health officials say the actual number of new cases is much higher. As Marina von Stagelberg tells us, several provinces are seeing massive delays in testing, and for many people, getting their hands on rapid tests is a challenge.
Another day, another lineup for COVID-19 tests.
I think it's kind of crazy. I feel like it should probably be a little bit more accessible.
Both rapid antigen tests, the ones you take home to swab yourself, and PCRs, the ones confirmed in a lab, are hard to come by in large parts of the country.
This is the website I ordered from. I don't know if it's legitimate. It says it is.
Spencer McCall bought her rapid tests online. Like a lot of Canadians, the Sudbury mom can't track down any in her city.
I feel like it's almost like a luxury item right now, right? Between that and getting the KN95 masks. If you find them, if you can afford to buy them, if you know someone.
Some private clinics are offering quick turnaround PCR tests if you can pay $180. Manitoba's wait time for a free PCR swab has stretched up to a week. So the province has cut a deal with a private lab to handle an extra 1,000 tests a day. Meanwhile, a grocery store in Winnipeg is selling individual rapid tests in Ziploc bags for $40 a pop.
Not only is it inequitable, it's also really inefficient.
This expert says a patchwork of testing will hurt marginalized communities the most.
There are people who are at real risks in terms of going into work, taking on high-risk occupations, being around high-risk individuals, not having access to these tests.
Many of those people can't just buy a test or wait in line.
The mailbox would have been the easiest way.
Everyone's got a mailbox, but you know, the older crowd, they can't stand out line like the younger crowds can.
It's not just inequities. A lack of proper testing can also contribute to inaccuracies in case counts too. BC has reported nearly 3,000 new infections. But Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the real number is likely 3 or 4 times that. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Toronto.
Another major sporting event has been canceled because of COVID-19 just days after it started. The International Ice Hockey Federation is canceling the remainder of the World Juniors. This comes after multiple teams pulled out of games. It explains the council has determined that with another forfeiture, the third forfeited game in 2 days, the sportive integrity of the event has been compromised and the event must be canceled. The tournament began Boxing Day in Alberta and was scheduled to wrap up next week on the 5th. The event draws the world's top players under the age of 20. 9 games had been played in Edmonton and Red Deer before today's cancellation. The growing number of people in isolation is making it tough for some businesses to keep running. As Karen Pauls tells us, several restaurants and pubs in Manitoba are temporarily closing during what is typically the busiest time of the year.
Miles Gould is trying to keep his front entrance open, even though his pub is closed.
We closed because of safety reasons, primarily. I want to make sure that their guests and our staff are all safe and healthy.
Manitoba bars and restaurants are allowed to be open, but only at half capacity, and they have to stop selling alcohol at 10 o'clock. But between the restrictions and the staffing concerns, a growing number are making the tough decision to close, even though losing these normally busy weeks will hurt.
January is normally a little bit slower. Winter's here, as you can see. And we rely on that December sales, Christmas parties, that kind of thing, in order to get us through that period. It's very difficult, and my fear is for not only ourselves, but a lot of restaurants that might not be able to make it through this yet again.
On Monday, the Premier was confronted with that concern.
What message do you give business owners who are acting more proactively than your government?
Heather Stephenson's reply?
We did announce last week upwards of $22 million to help those businesses. We'll continue to work with our partners in the business community to help them get through this.
But the industry estimates 15% of all restaurants in Canada have already closed, and many more are at risk.
Our recovery will probably be 12 to 18 months, even after the restrictions are up. So we'd love governments to step up and say, we're committed to continuing to support the industry to try and pay down some of your debts.
This pub owner hopes there will be long-term help.
Almost half my workforce contacted me in a 3-hour period saying they were going to be getting COVID tests.
Mark Turner is surprised the Manitoba government hasn't ordered a full lockdown.
I think the general consensus and the feeling is it's much safer right now not to be open.
So for now, he plans to overhaul his kitchen, revamp the menu, and hope he'll be able to turn the lights on again sometime soon. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Omicron is also pushing up case counts around the world. Infections have hit all-time highs in Europe and in the U.S. There are records being broken again. As Katie Nicholson shows us from Washington, it has demand for tests and boosters soaring.
Not an ideal way to spend the holidays.
We came because we were a family gathering for Christmas, and one was very concerned that he had it, so we figured we'd get ourselves covered.
As the U.S. shatters COVID records, demand for testing outstripping the supply.
We've staffed up and really moved vaccinators into testing today because that's the high demand. But just know in the neighborhoods, at a certain point, the police department does have to shut off lines.
And hospitalizations also creeping up.
Starting to see a pretty good climb in the number of COVID-related symptom transports that were taken to the hospital.
And yet, hospitalization and death rates remain low compared to the skyrocketing case numbers. And the White House Pandemic Task Force says early data suggests that trend will continue. Still, kids especially being affected. Pediatric hospitalizations up 50% in some states, amid worry about what a return to class might mean. Chicago Public Schools sent kids home for the holidays with tests. FedEx boxes now overflowing, waiting to have those tests picked up and analyzed. Some results already known.
We have 10 staff, including our principal, plus 25 students who've now tested positive in the last 2 weeks.
In New York, Broadway show The Music Man temporarily on ice after leading man Hugh Jackman tested positive.
Found out at 12 noon today, and at 1 o'clock she had her very first rehearsal as Mariam.
Just days after praising an understudy who had to step in when COVID forced his co-star out.
Broadway shows not the only things being canceled. Some cities scrapping their New Year's parties, while others are scaling them back so that more don't wake up in 2022 with COVID. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
Temperatures are dropping to record lows. Do you know how to spot the signs of hypothermia? When we're back, we'll tell you what to look for and how to prevent damage from dangerous exposure.
It may be one of the least glamorous parts of international travel, sitting in line at the Canada-US border. But since May, some people have been jumping the queue at this crossing, much to the delight of customs officials. More than 18,000 people have picked up these $10 stickers, which lets them go through an express lane without stopping. And if they have goods to declare, they fill out a special form before they hit the border, drop it in this box, and drive off. The bill for duty gets charged on their credit card. It's the honor system to a point.
Okay, that organ came from Canada.
There are random checks with stiffer penalties than normal for smuggling, but officials say abuses have been few.
That's fine. Everything's good there.
And this is just for dirty laundry. I have a washer and dryer.
You're all done.
And even with these checks, this project is getting rave reviews from many of the people who use it.
The big advantage is that you don't have to line up. That's the big advantage. You can go straight through.
It's just that I do cross-border shop. I live in White Rock, and I find that it makes life a lot easier if you can just whip that down and whip back again.
Comments like that make customs officials wince. They say they don't want to be seen to be encouraging cross-border shopping. And they point to a survey which shows only about 20% of the people who picked up these permits said they did so to make shopping trips easier. At the border town of White Rock, the Chamber of Commerce says it was worried about the express lane at first, but now it's not a big concern. In fact, the Chamber hopes the lane will attract Americans northward.
We have a beautiful city here, beautiful area. We hope that people are going to say, oh my gosh, instead of having to line up for an hour to come up here and visit Canada, White Rock, South Surrey, they can have a pass and they can come through in 5 minutes.
Hi. The pilot project officially ends in March, and a similar experiment on the American side will also be reviewed early next year. Ian Hannah-Mansing, CBC News at the Pacific border crossing in British Columbia.
The lights burned brightly all night at the Cypress Bowl ski resort as search and rescue teams combed the mountain for 5 overdue skiers.
They were confirmed located at 1:57 a.m. After making voice contact at 1:53.
The 5 teenage skiers were found in an out-of-bounds area that was roped off. A fellow skier who refused to go out of bounds with them reported them missing. Rescuers tried to walk the skiers out last night, but it was snowing too hard. At first light, a Canadian Forces helicopter rescued them from the mountain. All were cold and tired, but luckily had no major injuries. The rescue operation cost the ski resort thousands of dollars to keep the lights on and the chairlift operating through the rescue. The manager says he wants his costs reimbursed as a deterrent to others.
There is no question that the skiers skied out of bounds, and I think they should be responsible for their actions.
The 5 skiers were taken to hospital where they met their parents. No one wanted to talk about the cost of the rescue. All 5 will be released from hospital by this evening. Andy Orr, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
All schools will open on either January 3rd or 4th as planned for children of essential workers and those with special needs, with full return to classes for all students on January 10th.
BC is delaying the return to school for most K-12 students by a week. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says a phased approach will allow for more safety measures.
A lot of the farmers out here are in the same scenario. They're third-generation farmers, and they have a strength that's deeper than you could know.
1 month after farmers in the Fraser Valley were hit with extreme rain and flooding, they are now tackling the extreme cold. The Provincial Mental Health Helpline says it has seen a 15 to 20% increase in calls since the floods, and it's encouraging those in need to reach out for access to supports. Environment Canada has issued dozens of winter weather warnings across BC, as most of the province braces for another round of extreme cold and heavy snowfall to close out the year. Between 5 and 10 centimeters of snow is expected to blanket the south coast starting this evening, including across the lower mainland and the east coast of Vancouver Island. It's important to know the risks before you venture out into the cold. With information about hypothermia prevention, we're joined by the Executive Director of BC Adventure Smart, Sandra Riches. Thank you so much for joining us today. So Sandra, there's a lot of snow out there. Temperatures are dropping. We're seeing records. And a lot of winter adventurers are heading out. What homework do they need to do before they plan a trip?
And you hit the nail on the head. They do have a little bit of homework to do. At the Adventure Smart program, we're here to increase awareness to help reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls in the province of British Columbia. And if you can follow our 3 T's, you'll be on the right track before you even hit the path. The first T is trip planning. Making a plan and filing a trip plan with a trusted emergency contact is really the first start to your adventure, and that starts at home. The second T is having the right training for the activity that you're choosing to do in the season that you're choosing to do it in now. One great example for winter training would be an avalanche skills training or snow safety. And the last T is taking those essentials with you and adding to it season and sport specific. So trip planning, training, and taking the essentials is a good start.
Now, what are some of the dangers or signs of hypothermia? And we're not just talking, of course, trekking in the backcountry. I think you need a little bit more of that homework. But even just going out to go skating or going outdoors, what are some of the signs that we need to keep in mind, not just when we're doing those extreme adventures?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be extreme. We could just go out in these temperatures, which we're not used to in a large part of the province. And now that it's this cold snaps hit us, we need to plan before we go out and be prepared for those conditions. And you're looking for conditions that might change in your group. You know, your body is generating heat from the core and it has to heat our entire system. And so hypothermia occurs when the body loses that heat faster than it can produce it. If that core temperature drops too low, it can become threatening to you and anyone else out there. So we need to avoid it. We can do that by hydrating, drinking as we go. Keeping dry is critical. So if we're hiking and we get sweaty and hot and wet, that's not a good thing. Wearing the proper clothing will help you with that. It needs to be synthetic and close to your body. Snacking and eating will help you keep your engine moving, and avoiding any excessive heat loss.
In terms of signs or symptoms here, without panicking anyone, what are some of the things to look out for where you got to tell yourself, okay, there's something going on here that I need to pay attention to?
The early stages of hypothermia, which we can clue into, are shivering, decreased awareness, and unable to think and solve problems on your own. A little bit of confusion and some skin pale and cool to the touch. And as if we take it to another level, which is a little bit more advanced, there's obvious shivering, so possibly some stumbling if you're still out there walking, little or no effort to protect yourself. So your decision-making skills start to diminish a little bit, and you're really unaware of the present situation. And then as we move into an advanced stage, there's intense shivering, difficult walking, thick or very slurred speech, and no effort to protect yourself. And your skin appears almost an ashen gray and cold, and you might have possible hallucinations. If we go back to the positive side of that and really try to prevent that from happening in the first place, and making some great decisions and managing your risk to decide, should we go at all? Using your sound judgment if we should go at all, and maybe save it for another day when it's a little bit warmer.
Yes, and we're not used to these temperatures, so we'll definitely have to keep those things in mind. Sandra Richards is the Executive Director of BC Adventure Smart. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Take care.
We're not talking about a future scenario anymore. We're talking about climate change is here, it's real, and it's now.
Fires, floods, extreme cold, we're seeing it firsthand. Ahead, we hear from scientists who are looking to glaciers to better understand the weather and what it means for our rapidly changing planet. Also, a live look at 6:39. A look at, I think that's BC Place. Coming up, Johanna Wagstaffe joins us with a full weather forecast. How long can we expect the snow to stick around the lower mainland? And what's in store for New Year's Eve?
Cartoonist, illustrator, and lawyer. I am filming this in my home in beautiful, sunny Greater Vancouver, British Columbia, where I have been inside and away from people for about 17 days. This is not the easiest time to be alive, but luckily for you, my coping mechanism of choice is drawing funny and self-aware cartoons of myself.
This painting I did, I think, on the second day of social distancing. I really like this one because I think it is an accurate representation of how I was feeling at the time, just kind of manic and trying to do the right thing. The right thing being cooking a lot of food that will last me at least a couple days, as I'm not allowed to leave my house. I was also fortunate to make a cartoon for New Yorker magazine about maintaining appropriate emotional responses when cooking for weeks on end with your partner. And I really like this one too because it really shows how we're all just trying our best, and also how no one really knows how to handle these situations that we're now finding ourselves in. This is my amazing tilting artist desk, and it tilts to 45-degree angle, and it makes me feel very professional. This is a cartoon I keep on my desk to remind myself to take it easy. Lots of brushes within easy reach, a lot more pens, and my acrylic gouache paints, which I love a lot. This is when I had to do cross-examination with the flu. This is me eating all the Halloween candy. My mom feeding me food, being buried under piles of work in my imaginary office with my imaginary dog. This is my travel paint set. Folds open like that, has a nice little water brush, and I use it to paint on the go, and it's a very handy little tool. And it's my favorite thing in the world. I truly believe that the best way to deal with a hard situation is to turn it into something funny and then laugh at it. And that's why I think art is so important during a time like this. No one really knows how to process it, and art is a way for us to find a common language, to share experiences, and to cultivate joy.
Welcome back. First, it was a heat dome, then came the fires, and after that, flooding. BC experienced a series of climate disasters this year, and its glaciers are taking the hit. Johanna Wagstaffe set out on a high-flying journey with scientists who are mapping the rapidly changing landscapes to try and predict what's next.
A tranquil-looking flight over a BC mountain range, one that we have ice to thank for. The history of the Earth is pretty much written in the increase and retreat of ice. The features that we look at have been carved out by ice. You know, it's not like ice is a trivial thing in the history of our planet, and we just don't know what the world would be like without it.
Inside the plane, science hard at work.
We're able to monitor rates of change in the ice sheet itself.
They're getting a bird's eye view of how global warming is impacting glacial melt and the rippling effect. The crew's pilot, Robin Stewart, has been flying over these same glaciers for years.
They're so huge that I'm sure it's hard for many people to understand that they could disappear.
Where are we headed?
This is the Hakka UNBC Coastal Observatory.
This is where you spend most of your time?
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, this is my office.
This is a laboratory with wings. Stephen Beffert works on the Airborne Coastal Observatory.
So this is our spectrometer.
His job is to operate the equipment on board that takes measurements of the ground below.
This is a highly specialized plane. We basically have taken a Piper plane, gutted the whole thing, and put in our sensors specific for our projects that we want to get done here. Okay. And then this is the laser here. We do a laser scan over all of our project areas to make a 3D digital model.
That's right, lasers on a plane.
We're basically firing light pulses out of this box. As the light hits the ground and comes back, we can figure out how far that light has traveled. Once all the data is collected, we're shooting millions and millions of points. We can put all those points together to create a 3D digital model, a terrain model of whatever we're flying over. This quantifies what's on the ground as it lays. So topographical 3D mapping.
They're used to map out a rapidly changing landscape, showing how extreme events like this year's heat dome in British Columbia have taken the ice away.
The glaciers influence the weather. Even, flying an airplane over the glaciers, I can tell that. Especially on a hot day where there's ice underneath you, the air is sinking, and where the air is over rock, which gets heated by the sun, is rising. It's hard without being a scientific expedition to really see it, because the seasonal variation is quite large.
From the sky, it looks picturesque, but below the clouds, the aftermath of one climate disaster after another. After the heat dome came the fires, and after the fires came the floods. Extreme weather events in British Columbia are unfolding at a frantic pace, and that's what has scientists scrambling to assess each disaster and try to predict what perfect storm could happen next.
We have lots of glaciers that are retreating rapidly due to climate change.
For years, glaciologist Brian Menounis has been sounding the alarm on glacial loss. He's one of the scientists working to understand the data from Airborne Coastal Observatory and what it means for our future.
So in British Columbia, we are blessed with many thousands of glaciers, over 15,000.
We met him on a dike at the edge of Vancouver, the last stop as ice runoff makes its way to the open ocean.
The tremendous amount of warm temperatures at that time would rapidly deplete the mountain snowpack. This particular event was quite severe in terms of its melt. There were a lot of unusual conditions that coincided collectively to bring us where we are today. And this year, it's been especially bad for our glaciers.
It was not long after this conversation with Brian that BC was hit with a series of atmospheric rivers, causing some of the worst flooding this province has ever seen.
When we think about these extreme events, these are caused by climate change, and we're not talking about a future scenario anymore. We're talking about climate change is here, it's real, and it's now.
It's not just what these scientists are discovering, it's how they're sharing that information.
What we do need in terms of preparing for future changes in climate is better and more rich geospatial data, and we need people to actually work with those data to make sensible decisions going forward, both in terms of planning and preparing for the next hazard or the next disaster, but in some cases, dealing with the aftermath of when disaster strikes.
So we can fly anywhere down to...
Back on board the science laboratory, that's exactly what scientists are trying to understand. What's next?
So we've got accurate records before the heat dome, accurate records after the heat dome. We can really see what that heat event did to the glacier.
A clear picture in quick time. Adding to the slow but steady work of government scientists, this team can track changes right after a disaster.
One that we survey a ton of times, called Place Glacier. It's just north of Pemberton. And one thing that's special about it is that they have survey data on that going back to probably the 1950s. Like, people must have hiked up or something to get the data. But so then we've got a continuous record of what's going on with that glacier.
In fact, Place Glacier has been continuously monitored since 1929. This year, melt is astonishing.
It's our territory. It's our homeland.
People like Edwin Bacati from the Lillooet Nation know this all too well. He was on the ground, living through that melt from Place Glacier.
I was evacuated out of my house for flood precaution, and we didn't even get moved back into our house, and we were in fire season. It literally went from floods to fire.
Edwin was one of many forced from his homes when the extreme heat last June rapidly melted the ice in the surrounding mountains, leading to widespread flooding.
The glaciers in the last few years, they've changed so much that it doesn't matter which glacier you go and look at now, all you can see is gray rock. You don't see any ice almost anymore. And it concerns us what's to come of it when we lose all the ice.
What does that loss mean to you and to your culture and your people?
It's not just First Nations people that are going to feel it. All people are going to feel it. The world is changing here, and it's very concerning when we watch our neighboring communities burn to the ground in just a few minutes. We have to be aware, and we have to recognize that, Mother Nature herself is going to retaliate against everything that's happened.
And then, 4 months later, this happened.
Look at this bridge.
The intense atmospheric river pouring like a fire hose over southern BC for days. We checked in on Edwin again after the waters receded. How are you? He knows he's one of the lucky ones, able to return home.
Through all this chaos, we're doing fine. Yeah.
You talked about this feeling that something ominous is still to come.
We certainly have changed the place and over the years. And I think those impacts are coming back to bite us, and we need to change our practices.
And when you spend 200 hours in one summer flying over those impacts, you can't help but feel the loss.
Have you ever heard of an astronaut who came back from space and didn't say, what they all say, didn't say people, this is the only planet we've got. I've seen it from up there. We have to preserve it. And you get up close and personal with the glaciers and the same thing.
Well, we might not have all the answers right now, and we can't stop the next disaster from happening. Scientists will continue to search for clues, one flight at a time. Johanna Wagstaffe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Wow, fascinating information, Joe. Thank you so much for giving us just a glimpse into what they work on year-round. I do have a quick question for you because you study weather and climate change, and I'm just curious, because you do so much work on this, did anything stand out for you? Something that you hadn't heard before, something that really pulled your heartstrings doing that project there?
Yeah, Isabelle, it's just the speed at which these events are unfolding. And I know, so many of you watching communities are still struggling from the back-to-back disasters, and scientists are struggling as well. It was heartening to see how much dedication these scientists have, trying to put these clues together. That story was actually just days away from running. We thought the biggest story of the year was the heat dome the forest fire season. And we had it all packaged, ready to go. And then the floods hit. We can't even keep up with these disasters. But again, it's heartening for me to see how fast people are working and how much they're collaborating. And that's really the takeaway, that scientists are collaborating, communities are collaborating. And that's really what gives me heart. I know, Isabelle, you were mentioning earlier not that I needed another one to track, or that we all didn't need another big winter storm, but indeed we've got the deep freeze and the snow knocking on our door. But Isabelle, I'm hopeful that we'll get a bit of a break as we head into 2022. Let me get you through the next couple of days, though, because we do have severe weather in place with those snowfall warnings, -5 right now for YVR. So as that Pacific system slides down the coast and enters into that cold air, that's the recipe for snow. We've got 10 centimeters for Metro Vancouver, east side of the island, Victoria, and we're seeing that snow falling into Prince George and the Caribou region right now. Want to take you through the big picture, those purples, that's the Arctic air mass. We'll see a bit of a break Saturday into Sunday, and then that Arctic air mass dips down for early next week. But into mid next week, we should see a return to above seasonal temperatures. So a bit of a flip-flopping forecast once we get through to Sunday, but cold until then. See all that blue across the province as the low sinks south. That will be followed by another Arctic high. So we don't get much of a reprieve from the temperatures. In fact, in the interior, still looking at minus double-digit highs. Victoria might be on the plus side for one day, but it's a -2 for us in Metro Vancouver. Sunshine for the afternoon after we get through that overnight snow. A beautiful but cold Friday. And then, Isabelle, I'm sure you and I will be tracking that weekend storm as it gets closer. I will keep you posted.
We are so lucky to have your expertise. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.
Stay with us.
Has the game changed for you over the years?
Yes, it's changed quite a bit. Seems to get a little harder now than it used to be. I joined the club in '76, so I guess I got about 45 years in. It's great curling, at club curling is always good because you make so many friends, meet so many people and everything else, so that part was always good.
He was kind of the grand master, the grand poobah of the curling world, and I think one of the things that's kept him curling so long is that he's a competitor, and he likes to win. And, well, so do I, as a matter of fact.
Kind of like the competition a little bit, and like I say, the friends that I've made here and everything, it's great fun meeting with them and everything like that. It's that you do have to stay active. Once you start hibernating a bit, you sort of go downhill then after that. So, yeah, I think they have to keep busy, all right.
Don't mistake it for shuffleboard or checkers or something like that. It is an athletic pursuit. It requires strength, coordination, balance, and control. I'm very fond of John. I think he's a great gentleman, and he plays fair. He plays hard, and he's an inspiration to the seniors.
Oh, I don't know. Everything, I guess. My life's been pretty regular, and I've had a great family and everything like that. So, but I don't know. I can't wish for much more than everything that I've got.
Well, John probably doesn't realize this, but he's always been kind of a hero to me. I hope I'm curling when I'm 90, and who knows, even beyond that. But it'll be a tough goal to achieve.
Well, I'm still in my 80s for another few days.
You gonna keep playing into your 90s?
I hope so.
It may not have been a banner year for all of us, but that doesn't mean there haven't been windfalls. In fact, 2021 has set records when it comes to lotto wins for BC players. The BC Lottery Corporation says it's paid out nearly $900 million in prizes over the last 12 months, and nearly half of that, roughly $400 million, was given out to winners who purchased their tickets in the Lower Mainland and the Fraser Valley. In September, Burnaby's Christine Lawson won the $70 million Lotto Max jackpot, making her the largest single prize winner in BC's history. And like her celebration, unfortunately, I am not among the winners. Maybe next time. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC News at 6. We just want to remind you, if you're not already watching us on CBC Gem, that is our free app. Check it out. And we'll leave you with these stunning shots of a hummingbird feeding in the snow. Stay warm out there. Good night.